All right, welcome to Westeros.org on YouTube, where I'm going to be discussing the very long night that I've just lived through, and the rest of you as well, I suppose, that are watching. Um, we're going to be discussing episode 3, and the title ended up being The Long Night. The email just came in from HBO with the press release for the episode. We had a vote on Twitter actually going during this week to see what people thought it was going to be titled. The Battle of slash for Winterfell was the most popular choice. The Long Night was just behind that. I had my money on The Long Night. It felt like an appropriate choice, plus the fact that HBO has been opposed to George calling the spin off The Long Night might actually be in part explained by the fact that they had already decided on it for an episode title. It was written by David Benioff and Dan Weiss and directed by Miguel Sapochnik. I'm probably mangling his name there. And well, this was, of course, the big battle to end all battles. This was the Great War. And did it live up to expectations? Well, I'm going to try and collect my thoughts on this and give you something resembling a rambling review, but it has been a very long night. First of all, did you see the episode? As everyone expected, it was very dark. It was also in bits very foggy. This is all appropriate, of course. It's nighttime. We know that the icy fog comes with the White Walkers, but it certainly makes it very hard to follow. The choices they had made earlier on with the fast whites also meant that the actual battle scenes, for the most, were extremely chaotic, and a lot of fast cutting made it very hard to make out certain parts of it. But of course, they made sure that we saw the important parts, the heroic sacrifices, and perhaps we should begin by thanking a few people for their service on the show. I made a little list. We see Ed going out quite early on. And then we have the heroic sacrifice of Lyanna Mormont, who also briefly gets to come back as a white, or at least her eyes open when the Night King is waking everyone in Winterfell up again. We have Beric serving his purpose according to Melisandre. Given the end of the episode, I'm guessing that was making sure that Arya lived. We have Theon going out after a little thank you speech from Bran, defending Bran, who didn't seem to be doing very much, which is something I will get back to. We have Jorah going out defending Dany, which of course was appropriate, and then Melisandre, I guess, having used up all her magic on that neat little trick she had with the trench, for example, and for her pep talk with Arya. Once we saw her going with her little routine of brown eyes, green eyes, and blue eyes, and that little spark of something between Arya and Melisandre, that gave an inkling of where they were going with that, and it seems that she served her purpose as well. The pacing of the episode, I think, is pretty good. And there are, of course, some amazing visuals. In particular, my favorite visual is probably the dragons above the clouds against the icy night like that. That was, that was really magnificent, I would have to say. Everyone had guessed, it seems, on the internet that the dead in the crypts would come back to life, because they've made so much of the fact that the crypts would be safe. I hadn't thought so myself, actually. I didn't think that they were gonna have time for it with so many other things to do in this episode. And as it turns out, it was a very brief bit. It really didn't have much impact. It kills off some NPCs. It gives us some meaningful looks between Tyrion and Sansa. And that's about it. It kind of just seemed to take up time. I mean, it adds to the very end of the episode where you've got the sort of Lord of the Rings style music fade out, slow motion bits. We know that they were inspired by the Battle of Helm's Deep, and that was certainly apparent in the structure of the episode, the use of people in the crypts, sitting there and waiting and not being able to affect the outcome. I suppose Sansa was their Eowyn, basically. Sansa, who, by the way, has this rather strange exchange with Tyrion. I mean, she's being all fatalistic and so on, but her reason for why it wouldn't work out between her and Tyrion is Dany and his divided loyalties. Other than that, apparently she'd be perfectly happy to resume her marriage to Tyrion. So some of the character moments were a little odd to me. There are also, I think, again, I'd have to give some eye rolls to the fact that some saddles on those dragons would have been really darn awesome. In fact, the Night King might have wanted one as well, seeing as he takes a tumble, although it doesn't seem to hurt him very much. But how they stay on during those dragon dog fights, I have no idea. It's a mystery, or lots and lots of glue, I guess. I guess I should just run down I took some very fast notes over the episode to just give some of my impressions on things. It's even a bit more disorganized than usual, just because of it running so long and being so, I had to have my eyes on it all the time to try and catch things. If not, for example, I might have missed the fact that Ghost was there for a moment and then seems to have disappeared, so I don't know if they have killed him off or did anyone spot him later on in the episode. Melisandre, of course, has a neat trick with lighting the trenches after the waving of torches failed to alert any attention, and then everyone who tried to run for it didn't actually manage. So again, here a little not to call back to Helm's Deep. They could really have used an Olympic torch-bearing orc to run up and light the trench, but since they had Melisandre, they didn't actually need one. Let me see here, what else? Oh right, Tyrion and Sansa, I touched on that. They make some weird visual choices back and forth with the whites, for example. When they're using them to block off the trench, or the Night King is using them to walk into the flaming trench, they don't seem very flammable all of a sudden, which they've been in the past. Maybe he got them to take a bath beforehand or something, I'm not sure. Also, they kind of vary on the dusting effect. Sometimes they shatter when hit by dragon glass, but it only seems to be when they have time for for CGIing the effect, like with the giant that Lyanna manages to kill before she dies, and of course with the Night King at the end. But a lot of the regular run-of-the-mill whites, they just die, and some of them even bleed, like the one that Arya manages to stab in the throat in the crypts. Arya, of course, has a bit of a freak out moment after Beric has used her as an example to Sandor why he should keep fighting. Then she decides that, oh shit, there's a bit too much death here today, and that's the scene we had seen earlier in the trailers with her running in panic around in Winterfell. And then of course she finally gets her little pep talk with Melisandre, who calls back on the whole, what do we say to the god of death, and not today. It's not the only callback. During the episode, we get Arya telling Sansa to stick him with a pointy end when she gives her the dagger. Where else do we have? Night King at the end. I think I'll spend some time on the end, basically, because the whole setup, of course, has been for us to feel that Bran is very important. At one point, I mean, the plan is for him, he says that the Night King's going to come for him, so they set him up in the Godswood. He's got his Ironborn and Theon defending him as sort of a last line of defense. And Dany and Jon were supposed to lurk around with the dragons to lure out the Night King. The plan there doesn't really work. Obviously, plans aren't necessarily supposed to be foolproof. It all gets rather more chaotic than that, but it doesn't seem like they had to stay out of the way for the Night King to show his face. He seems determined to do that anyway. Bran's little "I've got to go," where he sort of shows up with the ravens, spotting the Night King. I don't know if that is supposed to be what prompts him to attack, but other than that, Bran doesn't really do anything, and I felt that was extremely anticlimactic. The fact that, is it really just supposed to come down to the fact that Bran is important as the memory of the world, so the Night King wants to kill him, and if he does, everything's over? I mean, that's how they set it up, really. Everyone is set to die in Winterfell if the whites and the reanimated dead don't start falling apart. And Jon decides to pop up from behind his cover to yell really loudly at the undead Viserion, and Jorah is dying while defending Dany from waves and waves of dead. In the crypts, everyone's going to die if the undead of Winterfell get to run around more, and so on. Basically, there's something big has to happen. Basically, the Night King, they build everything towards the fact that the Night King has to die, and this from the perspective of sort of what we know in the books, that there isn't a Night King, and that George has spoken against the idea of a Dark Lord, that you kill him and that's you're done with the fighting. Basically, they set it up very much like the drop of the ring into Mount Doom, except that is a much more poignant scene in many ways than Arya leaping out of nowhere after the Night King has slaughtered Theon, or just and is walking up to Bran with his clawed hand stretched out and is going to get rid of the memory of the world here. And then there's this little wind brushing over the White Walkers behind him. I guess that's Arya running or something, and then she just leaps out of nowhere and stabs him, and that's it. Everything falls apart and we're fine. Is that how easy it's supposed? I mean, there's a lot of fighting beforehand, but when you center everything on this one figure, the end will always be weirdly anticlimactic if you sort of see the death of that figure, the killing of that figure, as that is the moment. I mean, if you look at the end of The Lord of the Rings, it is the dropping of the ring into Mount Doom, which then dissolves the spells that hold Sauron together. Sorry. He's not actually there. He's not present. Nobody is fighting him head on. It just works better. It's more because there you have the personal struggle and everything with actually being able. Can I do it? There's no can I do it for Arya. It's just, well, she's had her pep talk and she knows I'm there to kill the Night King, and that was why Beric had to defend me. And Bran really, I mean, we've had all these theories, I haven't subscribed to them myself, of Bran being the Night King, of Bran doing some time travel stuff to control everything or set up everything, and ultimately it seems he's just a memory, or he's just the memory, and there's nothing else he can do. Not that I expected him to, get out of his wheelchair and start fighting the Night King or whatever, but when you concentrate it again into a couple of people like this, rather than the bigger picture, you get these sort of problems where you have to kill off the big bad, and when you kill the big bad, it's always going to be there's always the risk of an anticlimax there. If you look at some other things where you kill off a big bad that is a huge problem, take Buffy season 5. Killing Glory is a huge moment, but then it is not the end, because the end of the world is still coming, and Buffy still has to sacrifice herself to actually stop what has been set into motion. So it is not just about striking down the big bad. Here we do get a very nice final visual in when Melisandre, who has promised Davos that she'll, he doesn't have to worry about killing her, which he, promised he would do the next time he saw her. She'll be dead before dawn, and she narrowly manages to hold to that promise. She's obviously used up all her power. We see when she takes off her necklace that the stone kind of flickers and the fire goes out, and then we see her collapsing. Obviously all her strength went into this last battle, and maybe the final straw was the pep talk with Arya. Let's see if else what I managed to see me what else I managed to write down, rather. Right, and I did think that the crypts was just a distracting bad choice. I think I already said that. So you can't fault the visuals, you can't fault the tension, especially at the beginning. The build-up is really good. Some of the dragon fighting, hugely impressive. I don't know if we're supposed to think that maybe we don't see Rhaegal again. We do see Drogon coming in and comforting Dany at the end. I don't know if Rhaegal is supposed to have been killed by Viserion in that final sort of tangled tumble that they do after the Night King has been thrown. And I think Jon also seems to be thrown, but probably not from such a great height. It was definitely hard to follow. So we might have a few more dead that weren't clearly accounted for, and obviously we have piles and piles of bodies, ex-whites and those who were recently whiteified and then just died again when the Night King shattered. So structurally pretty good. Mood-wise, pretty good, and pacing, some missteps definitely, but pretty good. They should have tried to make it a little easier to see things. I mean, they spent a lot of money on this episode. They had too many characters to follow, I do think. The fact that they wanted to show us people in the crypts, but I mean, we lost a lot of people along the way, and I don't mean that they died. I don't think they did anyway. They seem to want to show deaths. We see Brienne occasionally crawling out from bodies and then getting buried under bodies again. We see Jaime here and there. Not a lot of people have lines. We see Grey Worm a couple of times. Again, going back to The Lord of the Rings and Helm's Deep, since they've cited it as a reference, they had fewer characters to follow. They made more of a character story. For example, not that I agreed with that in Lord of the Rings, the way that they made, they bolster Aragorn by sort of making Theoden very hesitant until he finally has his moment and rides out a last time, as he thinks it is. They were able to, with fewer characters, give more depth to each character and more sense of a story for each character. Here we just get glimpses, and there's not really a full story for that many characters. Even Arya comes in relatively, I mean, we see her some bit early on, but then she comes in relatively late. She's obviously the Theoden of the episode in some ways, I guess. She has her big misgivings, and then she gets bolstered by Melisandre and goes out and does the big deed. So, yeah, I am disappointed in the ending. Even the actual end with Melisandre there, I like, but the Night King, I think it was a mistake to do this whole thing with making a Dark Lord when George had said that there wasn't supposed to be a Dark Lord. So that's probably, other than, again, I said I had the eye roll for the saddles. That's probably my other big eye roll. Really, you shouldn't have gone there. You shouldn't have built up the Night King and Bran in that way. I mean, Bran seems to be alive and fine. Is he going to be needed for something else? Maybe. Otherwise, I think I think George has something, I hope George has something much better planned. I have my thoughts about what some of it is, but I hope I can't guess most of it, really. This was a little too obvious in some ways, and people tried to guess at a lot of other things, and this was too obvious, too simple. So, yeah, it's ultimately a bit of an anticlimactic resolution, which even though they did a great job with the music and the mood, you kind of felt a little let down by that. So I'm gonna see what everyone else thinks and try not to make this too long, because it is very, very late, and we actually came home from Stockholm. Today we've been doing some talks at the SF bookstore in Stockholm Saturday evening, had a late evening there, and then came back today and have fetched our puppies and reinstalled ourselves. So I need some sleep. Let's see where we are on the comments, if I can actually read them, if my eyes are... Yes, we had a lot of issues making out what was going on the screen. It was very, very dark. I did not watch the episode, the inside the episode yet. No, Dragon Demands. Let me see. You said that he admitted that they made stuff up that wasn't in the books. Well, if he said that, I am glad he said that and didn't try to claim that. I mean, they promised they weren't going to reveal what things were from George, and if they avoided doing that, I'm very glad. I do think that I don't see a lot of this happening. I do think Melisandre using upper power and dying that way is very, very likely. She has one purpose in life. Yes, I do think that she's going to fulfill it in some sort of way where she uses up her reserves and the fire finally goes out. Okay, he said that he got the idea that Arya would kill the Night King about 3 years ago, when, yes, that would be after the meeting with George. And I suppose, in a sense, with them playing up the whole god of death, and the Night King is death, and he wants an endless night, and actually they even make the comparison, isn't that what dying is, fading from memory? So they do equal him with death, and they make it very clear in this episode with Melisandre and Arya's exchange. So I suppose once they went down that route, that was going to be their purpose for Arya. I don't think it is anything like George's purpose for Arya. Again, there isn't a Night King. So no, a lot of this, some of the things that happen due to this, some of the deaths and things, maybe people who are going to die in the course of the big fights for wherever this fight happens, if it is at Winterfell again or if it's further south. but the context is going to be wildly different. Do I think Arya is Azor Ahai? No. Well, she could be for David and Dan, but there's nothing that fits the prophecy. So it has no relevance on that as far as the books go, at least. Well, I don't think it is ridiculous to say that it is anything but outstanding. It is an outstanding achievement in terms of the technical difficulties and the uh, amount of work put into achieving this sort of battle episode. It is a technical achievement that is quite fantastic. But you've got to have story as well. You've got to have meaning. And when you have too many characters in one place like this, it becomes difficult to follow people, to deeply care for people, and they do try to lift up certain or promote certain deaths to make you feel them. But for example, the Sam's insistence on being out there fighting, when we sort of we get to see him realizing that this was probably a bad idea, and a lot of people have to spend their time saving him basically. It's good that he gave the sword to Jorah because Jorah saves him a few times, but it doesn't become much of a story ultimately. We get snippets, glimpses, quick flashes, just like the fighting, and I don't think that is necessarily very satisfying. But the big problem is really the ending and the resolution. The lead up is overall quite good. Why Jon isn't a warg or a skin changer in the show? Well, they wanted to do as little as possible with the direwolves. Quite clearly, they soon realized that wasn't an easy sell, and it cost too much, and so on. I said I don't know if we've seen the last of Ghost or if anyone spotted him towards the end. Well, I thought the touch with the Iraqs actually was it was visually very effective, and especially when they ride out and then the fires go out one after another. Basically seems like no one's supposed to survive there. Well, a few people come riding back, obviously, but it is a good visual for the opening, and then when you have the darkness and everyone galloping back, and you just kind of hear people's breathing. They made some smart choices, some smart directing choices. It's the writing that tends to let them down. Was Alice Karstark supposed to be in the Godswood with the Ironborn? I didn't catch that. She may be another goner, yes, that they didn't bother making too much of. Yes, they could have used some of those other wolves, certainly. That's a thread that they really seem to have just brought back Nymeria for Arya to say, oh no, we're no longer bonded. That's not you. You're a wild wolf now. Hmm. Yeah, Melisandre saying the night is dark and full of terrors. Well, I think everyone had realized by this then that the night was dark and full of terrors, even if you can't see them. I don't know if it was the White Hunt that they were recreating with the survival horror of the end, but some of it did feel a bit misplaced. A lot of it was spent obviously on trying to build up. Oh, Arya has her big moment of doubt, and then she gets all, yeah, I'm gonna go and kill the Night King. So they had to spend some time doing that move with Arya, basically. I think a lot of the inside Winterfell stuff was really just aimed towards that. That was the one story that they were working on pushing there. First with the Hound kind of being the strong one for a while, despite all the fire, and then Arya finally getting better again. Who will lead House Mormont now? Well, darn good question. There's gonna be a lot of houses that are lacking in people. I think they're gonna have to dig up some, fifth cousins twice removed or something like that, and hopefully not literally dig up, since we don't have a Night King now to resurrect them. But there might be some little Mormont hanging around somewhere. Yes, I do think that Game of Thrones has had a lot of good directors and not so good writers. This is absolutely true. I think for a lot of the battle episodes in particular, they have done very good direction. I don't like the fast cutting myself. I'm really not a fan of it. So I wish they hadn't gone with, established the super fast whites, especially when they're not always like that. It seems you kind of get sprint bursts occasionally, and then you just get this chaotic flailing in the fighting. Let's see if I can scroll up and see some of the earlier comments as well. I'm very sorry that I haven't had time to go back and answer that much in the way of comments. It's been chaotic. Getting a puppy right when the show started was perhaps not our cleverest idea, but hey, they decided to start the show now. Let's see what we have. There's a lot of commenting. You're being very busy bees. Well, yes, obviously they tried to make it look like more people were in danger than actually were. They were obviously not going to kill everyone with 3 episodes left. They weren't just going to leave it for, and now for, King's Landing for 3 episodes, where with Cersei gloating about everyone actually having died up north. But basically they wanted it to be clear that unless the Night King dies, everyone's toast. So it's all down to Arya killing him. It's all down to that one moment. Is there going to be something like that? There's going to be some resolution in the books, obviously, of the others, because the last book isn't, I think, going to be what George threatened once, of 800 pages of snow blowing over everyone's graves after the dead have won. So there's going to be some kind of resolution. Is it going to be this Arya ex machina? No, it's not going to be Arya ex machina. Is it going to be Bran ex machina? Well, I certainly hope that Bran is going to actually do something other than have a few ravens fly out and say hi to the Night King, because that wasn't very impressive. Well, yes, I guess he did. He didn't exactly gloat, but he certainly spent a lot of time savoring the moment before trying to kill Bran, and he could have used his magic spear. Oh wait, he did throw that after Dany and miss, so maybe he didn't have that. Do I think that the destruction of the White Walkers will involve actually visiting the lands of Always Winter? Not physically, but given that early vision from Bran, where he sees the hearts of the dreamers that have come before him impaled on the spikes around sort of the heart of winter. Sorry, the dreamers impaled, not their hearts, and the heart of winter. I do think that some Bran dream sequence will be involved in the final resolution of the threat. I can't see anything else, and if they decided not to make very much of that. Yes, it's definitely better when they're character driven rather than monsters, but obviously there's going to be battles as well. That's so. Well, I guess with the Night King being the first one made, and then propagating from there. Well, it's not strictly clear, because if they just made him and then told him to go forth, make more White Walkers, um, maybe the others that were made by the children have died or disappeared over the years. He's the only founding father left or something. I don't think they've thought through that mythology very much, to be honest. They created their own version of that, and they had their own vision of how they want to resolve this, and this is how they dealt with the threat of winter, and this is how they ended the long night. I wish they had come up with some better way of wrapping it, but I didn't really think they would. I always suspected that the focus on the Night King was going to be a problem in the end, and that's where I felt it ended up. Again, I do want to praise the episode for the technical achievement, but and the dragons are going to bump it up to at least a 7.5. I love those dragons, but it's not very satisfying story-wise. That's where I have to end on it. And I'll try this week, can't promise anything, that I will get back to looking at some of the more of the questions. I will have some more thoughts in the episode guide tomorrow, once I've recovered from the long night, and you'll be able to see the video again if you want to see me rambling again, and there should be some more stuff added to it, maybe some more thoughts on what I think this means for the future of the books and so on. We haven't really been able to do our book to screen this year because it's in very nebulous territory. So I think maybe I will do a video at the end talking about how much of this I think is actually in store for the future. But that will be once we've gotten through another 3 very, very long episodes. So see you again next week. Tech person, time to end the stream. You saw Elio's back passing by there.
Sorry about that, guys.